Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Tonight we are learning Leilu Nishmat Yenta Fega Bas Levi Yitzchak, as well as Leilu Nishmat Rabbi Ram ben Chaim Yehuda and Rabbi Cheskel ben Rabbi Ram. We're also learning for a Flash for Miriam Bat Ratzel. Okay, so we're gonna just jump right in. We're going to pull things from a lot of different sources, today. Actually, mostly stories. But, we're going to deal also very heavily in psychology today. So bear with me. Now, have you ever had a conversation with someone and that other person is in a very bad mood or very negative? Everything's just very negative. Everything's very bad. And you walked into that conversation, like normal, like in a healthy emotional state. And then you walk away and you're like, wait a minute, why am I in a bad mood? Like nothing happened to me. You just interacted with somebody else that was in a bad mood, and it almost like it was contagious and it affected you. Even furthermore, like sometimes you walk into a room and one person is in a bad mood in that room. No one said a word, like nothing. There's like one person in a bad, and everyone somehow feels it. Obviously, some people are more sensitive to this than others, but everyone somehow, feels it. And before we try to explain this, let me just bring out, there was once a poor person who would go very frequently to this wealthy businessman for his monthly handouts, let's call it. And the businessman, when this poor person came to the businessman's door, the businessman said, "Listen, I'm sorry, I hate to do this, but business has been very, very difficult. There's a lot of unexpected, expenses. That hasn't been what this month is, and I can't give you, what I used to give you." And this poor person, he's like, wait a minute. He couldn't understand. He couldn't comprehend. He says, because things are bad for you, I have to suffer? He says, what does one thing have to do with another? Now, this might sound a little bit far-fetched. Like, what do you mean? You're getting a handout. Like, what are you talking about? But the truth is, we can relate to this in a very, very clearly, and everybody can relate to this. Like, sometimes you have a bad day. Sometimes you have a rough day. And you go home, and your spouse, your kids, your employees, your employers, they all suffer because you had a bad day, because you're not in a good mood. It's like this effect that it kind of like spills over into your life. In psychology, this is like the effect of where you go and you're in a bad mood and you're kind of letting it out on someone else is called displaced aggression. Displaced aggression meaning is that you're in a bad mood. And here's a good example. Let's say someone cuts you off. You don't want to start having a confrontation, and whatever reason is, you're in a very bad mood. The person that you're going to let it out is the next person that you feel comfortable or maybe more powerful, and kind of let it out in this easier target, a subordinate, if I may. So it could be a child, it could be a spouse, whatever it is. It could be someone else. Meaning that in life, we believe as we go through our daily, structure and our daily, experiences, we think our emotions are personal. Like, my feelings, my issues, your feelings, your issues. But really, it's not like that at all. If you're in a bad mood, it affects me. And if I'm in a bad mood, it affects you. This is something that is called in psychology emotional contagion theory. This theory is that, was studied, and it was a very fascinating, concept where the emotions are transferred to someone else unconsciously, meaning other people catch your emotion. It's not a deliberative cognitive process. It's not a thought process that you go through. Like empathy, for example, is something that you see a person, you see the person sad. You understand why the person's sad, so you feel for that person who is sad. Meaning it's a thought process that you go through. You see someone hurt, you feel bad for them because they are not able to do it and they're going through pain. This is like in a cognitive process. Emotional contagion theory is not something that is conscious. This is something that is unconscious. This is, in the psychology world, they break it down into two steps. One is mimicry and synchronization, which is where when we interact with someone, we mimic, we copy their nonverbal cues. And this is based off of the mirror neurons, meaning that our brain copies the emotional and physical state of others. Meaning, if someone has a particular facial expression, vocal, the way that they're pronouncing, whether they're irritated, whether they're happy, their posture, it all we see it and we mimic it subconsciously. So if someone smiles at you, you smile back without even thinking. If someone's tensed and all fidgeting, your own posture becomes like all tense and all fidgety. The second aspect of this emotional contagion, theory is that we see something and we mimic it. But then what happens is that when we're doing something, our brain receives the feedback of our facial cues, of our voice, of our posture that we're mimicking, and it in turn it adjusts its internal emotional state. So if we see someone smile and we smile back, we're doing it subconsciously, but now we're smiling. So our brain thinks, okay, we're smiling, so now we're happy, so now there's positive thing. We look at someone and the other person is tense, the other person is the posture is very, very rigid. So we in turn respond to that, and our brain takes that into effect and puts that into our nervous system. Meaning, and this is something very, very fascinating, and we'll simplify it, that when someone else is in a bad mood, it affects you, it affects me, and it's not something that we're thinking, meaning it happens subconsciously. And they made studies upon studies, on this. There was a business school. There was a bunch of students that were in this particular business school, and the group this was like done on like so many different levels, which is so fascinating. So basically, you got a bunch of these students that were recruited, and they were told that they're going to be negotiating certain tasks. Now that's all that they said. Now the experiment implanted a guy on the inside, using air quotes, that was secretly working with the researchers. And what this person was going into, this secret inside person went to two different groups. In one group, he had a very positive effect. He was always very happy, very cheerful, very enthusiastic, very warm, and that's the way that he acted. And he was an actor. The second group, he acted as a negative, a negative person. A lot of skepticism, a lot of very easily irritated, arm crosses, body posture. Everything was very, very negative. Now, the people inside this experiment, inside this group, didn't know that this guy was on the inside. And the researchers told this group and says, listen, what you guys are going to be doing, you're going to be negotiating, you're going to be role playing and they gave him a scenario. The scenario was that there's a limited amount of resources. How are you going to allocate it in this particular business? And they split them into these groups. Now, there was a third part to this experiment, and that is that they had observers, trained observers that would observe this interaction and how the people and how these groups would interact with each other. Now, these observers didn't know that there was an inside guy. So there was like three parts to this experiment. There was the guy that was secretly inside, was in and on everything. Then there was the students that all they knew was that they had to figure out how to allocate resources on a limited budget. And then there was an outside resource that had to view the researchers, the students, and how they were interacting with one another. Meaning that they built this experiment from a bunch of different angles. And the results came back that when the inside guy was acting very positive, very confident, very happy, everything was great. It reflected in positive emotions from it's kind of spilled over, and it didn't spill over only to like, oh yeah, we're happy, we're doing good. The group was more cooperative. There was less conflict. There were better task performance, meaning they succeeded a lot more, as opposed to the other group, which when the person was acting negative, it actually affected them. So they came to the conclusion. Again, this was study after study. This is from many years, that when one person's mood affects the entire crowd, and not only that it affects that entire crowd, it affects the productivity, it affects the mood of the other people, it affects the whole aura of everything that was going on. So We see from here that if you're in a bad mood, it affects me, and if I'm in a bad mood, it affects you, and this is why it's called contagious. It's a contagious, aspect. Emotions are contagious. They actually found the interesting study that was done in 2016 by Harvard that negative moods actually spread faster than positive ones. But in any case, there's 2 points that we need to consider. Point number 1, your mood affects other people. Meaning that if you're in a positive mood, other people are going to be affected by that and in return react positively. If you're in a negative mood, it will affect other people. That's one point. Point number 2 is that you have to realize that other people's moods affect you. Meaning that when someone else is in a bad mood, you have to if you're aware of it, you're able to juggle it, appropriately. And be like, if someone else is in a bad mood, that's going to affect you. If someone's in a positive mood, that's also is going to affect you. So the question is, how do we respond? Let's go focus on the second aspect, where somebody else's mood is affecting you. How do we respond? The founder of the Chabad movement, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Ladai, was once raising money to ransom Jewish prisoners. And he went from city to city. He entered a particular city, and the people, the rabbis of the city said, listen, we'll go to particular houses. It was one very, very nice, fancy house. The rabbi, the other rabbi said to Rabbi Shneur Zalman, you can't go to this. He's a miser. It's a waste of time. Don't even bother with it. He gives everybody a penny. It doesn't make any sense. And the rabbi says, no. He says, I want to go to that house. Let's start off with that house. So they said, no, you don't understand. He says, we've been going in for so many years. The guy is a miser. He's extremely wealthy, but he's not able to part with his money. So the rabbi says, no, let's go. Well, the rabbi said to go, you go. They went he went with his entourage with other few rabbis. They knocked on this big mansion. This the wealthy man's servant opens the door. He says, yes, can I help you? He says, yes, we're rabbis, we're collecting, or is the owner home? And he says, give me a second. He goes, he runs, he comes back. He says, yes, the owner's here. Please come in. He brings him into the study. A few minutes later, this the owner of the house comes in, very well dressed. And he says, yes, rabbis, such an honor, such a pleasure. What can I do for you? And Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Ladai starts explaining. He says, there are Jewish people that are prisoners, and, he's coming here to ransom, he needs to ransom, he needs to raise money. And the guy is listening, very invested. He's like, yeah, no, I know that it's so suffering of the Jewish people. I totally get it. I want to help. I'll be able to help. Give me a second. He goes to the safe. He comes back with a tiny little pouch. He opens up the little coins jiggling, and he takes out what's equivalent of less than $1. And he says, here you guys go. He says, thank you for coming. You should have a lot of success in it. And Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Ladai looks at it, and he's like, wow. He's like, thank you so much. And he starts giving him blessings as if this guy just wrote him $1 million check. And he's blessing him with it. And then he takes out his receipt, and he's writing him a receipt. And in the receipt, he writes the blessings, and he gives them this, this tremendous, happy face. Thank you so much for helping the Jewish people. And he gives them the receipt, and they slowly walk out. And as they are, walking out, the rabbi says to the other people out there, he says, "Don't look back, don't say a word, just walk with me." And he walks slowly out, and walking very slow. After about 10 seconds, the miser, the owner of the house, calls and he says, "Rabbis." He calls them. He says, "Do me a favor, come back if you don't mind." And they turn around and they come back. He says, "Yes, can I help you?" And the miser is thinking, and he's like, "What? How much do you need to raise to get these people out?" And the rabbi responded. He says, "We need to raise 5,000 golden, coins." And he says, "Wow, that's a lie." He says, "Do me a favor, come in. I want to give you more." They come back in. He sits him down in his office. He runs back down to his safe. He comes back up a few minutes later with a big bag. And he says, "This is 1,000 gold coins. I want to give this to you to help ransom these Jewish prisoners." The other rabbis that were local, their jaws dropped down. They're like, "This guy never gave more than $1. Now he's giving 1,000 golden coins. This is a tremendous amount of money." And Reb Shneir Zalman Oladai takes the money and he says, "Oh, thank you so much." And he gives him the same style blessing as he gave him when he gave him $1. And he starts bestowing blessing, and he takes out a receipt and he writes with all the blessing, and he gives it and he gives it back to this miser. And they thank the miser and they start walking away. Again, the rabbi says, "Don't say anything, just walk with me." And they walk slowly. They get, down the driveway, and all of a sudden, the owner of the house calls them and says, "Rabbis, do me a favor, if you don't mind, just, come back." And, they come back and says, "Yes, what can we do for you?" He says, "Come inside. I want to give you more. I really feel for this cause." They come back, they sit back in his office, he runs back to the safe, comes back with even a bigger bag, and he says, "Here's the entire amount, here's the 4,000 gold coins, you could take it and ransom the Jewish, the Jewish prisoners." And he goes, and the rabbi, Reb Shneir Zalman Oladai, starts giving him the blessings, same blessings as he gave with $1, with 1,000, with the 5,000, with the 4,000. Gives them all the blessing, they sign gives them a receipt with all the blessing, and they, they part ways. The other rabbis of the community, they see this. They're like, "You don't understand what type of a miracle this is. This guy never gave $1. How did you get him to give?" They couldn't understand that he gave the entire sum. And the Reb Shneir Zalman Oladai respond. He says, everybody who gives $1 to it, they throw in the face. What do they say? Okay, maybe they try to be nicer. Can you give a little bit more? Can you give that? Yeah, the miser was wrong. Yeah, he should have given more if he had the ability to, but you can give all the excuses, but that's not our responsibility. Our responsibility, he gave charity. Okay, that's what we thank them and we bless them. If the rabbi would have responded in a negative way, be like, "Wait a minute, you live in this beautiful house, you could," or forget about even going there. If the rabbi would have just responded, "Maybe you could do a little bit more," the miser wouldn't have given anything. The rabbi responded in a positive fashion, in a positive way, and guess what happened? It penetrated the soul of this person and be like, "Wait a minute, I want to help, like I want to do more," meaning that our response to any interaction can change the other person, meaning that the other person has the ability to affect you based on their mood, but you have the ability to affect the other person on how you respond. There was a famous researcher by the name of Dr. John Gottman. He was a relationship researcher. He was a mathematician and a psychologist, and he spent decades observing couples and trying to, he wanted to really focus on relationships. And after years and years of studying this, he had a tremendous chachma in this. He had tremendous wisdom in this. He had the ability, if he would observe a couple for just 1 hour, he could predict with 90% accuracy if that couple is going to divorce or going to stay married. And he went through all these studies, and he came out with some conclusions. I want to give you one of the main conclusions. And that is that he said that the health of a relationship is either built or destroyed in the micro moments, in the small everyday things in life. That's what build the relationship. It's not about the grand gesture. It's not about giving that $10,000 ring. It's not about giving that bouquet of flowers that's going to take up the entire dining room. It's not about the grand gestures that builds a healthy relationship, but it's the daily micro moments. And he explains this as follows. His term that he coined was what he called bids of connection. Now, what a bit of connection, he explains, is an attempt for one partner of the marriage, of the relationship, to try to get an attention of the other partner. Now, this could be, a question, a positive connection. It doesn't matter. It could be anything. An example would be that you're walking with your spouse down the street, and your spouse says, "Oh, look at that beautiful bird." Now, this is a bid for connection. It's sharing, intention. He breaks it down. There's 3 potential responses that you can make in this scenario. There is turning towards it, meaning that you acknowledge it and you're like, wow, yeah, that is a nice bird. There's the second response of turning away, which is no response, like more of, let's say, looking at your phone and you're continuously, just looking at your phone and you're kind of ignoring it. That's a turning away response. And then there is the third response, which is turning against it, which is responding in a more aggressive way. Can't you see that I'm busy now? You're telling me about this bird. I'm on a phone call. That's a turning against. So there's turning towards, turning away, or turning against. And he came to the conclusion that happy marriages, happy relationships, positive relationships, they turn towards, they use the first response 86% of time. Those that end in divorce, they only use they turn towards 33% of the time. Meaning the other time is more negative. And he explains that the healthy relationship is how we respond to the other person's small emotional signals. If your spouse says they're feeling bad, or and you respond to that builds it. You ignore it, you go against it, that destroys it. It's all about the small moments in life. And this is something very, by the way, just if you heard this aspect, this was worth it for you to listen to this class. You want to build a relationship, whether it's with your children, whether it's with your spouse, whether it's with your parents, whatever it is. If you're able to pick up on those cues, and we're living a life that is so hectic, and even though we have so much luxury compared to years and years ago, we're always hectic, we're always busy, we're always doing something else, and it's so easy to just ignore the other person or not, and again, it's not even on purpose. It's just like you're overwhelmed, and you have so much going, and it's so easy to do that. And when you do that, you're destroying the fabric of your relationship. If you're able to just listen and respond, even if it's a second, that just builds the relationship. That just shows you how much a mood of the other person can affect you, and how much you can affect the other person in the other mood. Meaning the other spouse can be like, oh, I'm feeling very, down, or whatever it is, and you just acknowledge it, and you just jumped so many points. Now, when we look at all these concepts, we see that your mood affects me. My mood affects you. This is a biological, unconscious process. We're biologically connected, whether you like it or not. We're also spiritually connected. We know that the Gemara tells us, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelaz, that we're all connected to one another. Even in a Kabbalistic sense, we could go even deeper. You are more connected to certain people than other people, and that all depends on your root of your soul. If your root of the soul is the same as the other person, you're even more connected than the other ones. But as a nation in its entirety, we're all connected to one another. And our effect, the way that we respond, is not only we're in a bad mood. Like sometimes you're very busy, and someone comes over to you and you just brush them off. That has a tremendous effect both ways. You just brush the person. You weren't in a bad mood. You were just busy. You were just hectic. And with this, we could look into the Kav HaYashar, which we're going to the 10th chapter of the Kav HaYashar. This was just the introduction to the Kav HaYashar. And the Kav HaYashar, and you'll soon see why I brought all these scenarios and the psychological and the psychology behind this. The Kav HaYashar starts off in the 10th parak that if someone's making a Sudas mitzvah, whether you're making a bris, an engagement, a bar mitzvah, a wedding, whatever it is, it's very, very important to invite poor people. Very interesting, the lashon, the vernacular that the Kav HaYashar uses, hakiruim aniyim evyanim, those that are called poor and needy. And then the Kav HaYashar says, if you fail to do this, if you don't invite the poor and needy into your celebration, then the Samach Mem, the Satan, and all that he is connected to, and the woman that is also connected to, they bring judgment against you, and he brings proof. When Avram Avinu did not invite any poor people to the party that he made when Yitzchak was stopped, when he was being weaned, when he stopped nursing, the pasuk says right after that, Vayehi achar advarim, and after these matters, what happened was, then Hakadosh Baruch Hu tested Avram when he said, "Oh, you take Yitzchak and you offer him to a korban," meaning that he made a party. didn't invite the poor people. Again, it's a whole different. I was thinking if we should focus on this or not, because how do you understand that Avram Avinu was tents always open? They didn't invite people into this party. Not something that we should get into. Because we brought it up, the idea, just to answer it, is that Avram Avinu had his house always open. There's a difference when it's always open and versus when you're actively inviting, and that's really the like a point. But again, we're not getting into that aspect. The point is, Avram Avinu made a party, didn't invite the poor people. Because of that, the Satan was given the permission to test Avram Avinu with his son, that he should bring him up as a carbon to the altar. Kav HaYashar brings down another example, where is by Eov. Eov made a party for his children. No poor people were invited. The Satan was given permission to kill all his sons, all his daughters, get rid of his wealth, his livestock, and not only that, also afflict the person. So the Kav HaYashar says you have to be very careful. If you're holding some sort of party or some sort of feast, make sure that you invite the poor people to this, so that they won't have the accusers won't have to say anything negative against you in the heavenly court. And he brings down a story, and this is really the bulk of this chapter. It brings down a story from the Medrash. The Medrash Tanchuma in Parshat Ha'azinu. And that is, there was a certain wealthy, learned man who had an only daughter. She was beautiful, she was modest, she very pleasant, everything was great. And the father, set her up to get married with, a great guy. The night of the wedding, unfortunately, her husband passed away. Short while later, the father sets her up with another man, and she gets married a second time. And lo and behold, this husband dies again the night of the wedding. Everyone's starting to look, what's going on? I don't know, it seems a little bit fishy over here. Third time, she married a man, and the night of the wedding, the husband, passed away. This woman was beside herself. Can you imagine that? Getting married 3 times, all 3 times at the night of the wedding, your husband dies. Like, what do you like? She's decided that's it. I'm not getting married anymore. She's going to be a lonely widow for the rest of her days. This wealthy man had a brother who lived in a different town that was extremely poor. Had 10 boys, and he had many children, and his job would be that he would go into the forest, chop wood, sell the wood, and that's how they would survive. But they were so poor that they lived not paycheck to paycheck, day to day. If they didn't sell anything that day, they didn't have anything to eat. One particular day, they weren't able to sell any of the firewood, and they all went to sleep. They all went to sleep hungry. The next day, they were in the forest. They were chopping wood, and the father, because of the situation, he just passed out. The son was looking at this and says, I can't do this anymore. He goes over to his father, says, do me a favor. He says, can I go over to our uncle, your brother, in this other town? Do you allow me? The father says, do what you got to do. So he travels and he goes to visit his wealthy brother. And when the uncle sees him, he's so happy. He goes and he gives him hugs and kisses, and he says, wow, thank you so much for coming. And they start catching up. How is this person doing? How's this child doing? How's this brother? How's this sister doing? And they're catching up, and he's staying there for 7 days. Now he's about to part ways. And his nephew, the poor boy, goes over to his uncle and he says, listen, I have a request to give you, but I'm nervous to tell you. So the uncle says, tell me whatever it is that you want. I don't know, I'm a little bit nervous. He says, I'll tell you, but you have to promise me you're going to fulfill it. So the uncle says, fine. The guy has curiosity. He says, whatever you want, I'll fulfill it. So the poor nephew goes and he says, listen, I want to marry your daughter. And when the uncle hears this, he says, what? He says, why would you want to do that? He says, didn't you hear? He says, yes, I heard, I know, 3 people married 3 people. I want to do it. And the uncle's tried to convince him. He starts tearing up. He says, why do you want to? There's something, because of our sins, we don't know what's going on over here. We can't risk it. Why do you want to die? Why do you want to do that? Like, if you need money, I'll give you money. And the nephew was adamant. He says, no. He says, you told me, you promised me. He says, this is what I want. So, he's trying to convince him out. When the daughter heard about this, she was also trying to convince him out. But he was very adamant, and they set up an engagement, and they got engaged. And the day of the wedding, the morning of the wedding, there was a elderly man that came over to the chassan, and this was none other than Eliyahu Hanavi. And he calls over the chassan. He says, I need to tell you something. Good advice, and I warn you. He says, don't deviate anything from what I'm telling you. He says, tonight, by your wedding, there's going to be a poor person that's going to come to your wedding. And it's going to be a poor person, she'ein kamayu ba'olam. You won't, it's very obvious. There's no other person like this. And as soon as you see him, get up from your place, sit him beside you, wait on him with all your might, with everything that you have, your personal attention to him. He gave him this, the elderly gentleman gave him this information, and then he got up and he left. The night of the wedding came, and the groom was sitting over there at the head of the table, and all of a sudden a beggar appeared, and he noticed this this beggar, and he immediately remembered the conversation he had with this random elderly gentleman, and the chassan, the groom, immediately stood up. He goes and he brings this this beggar, sits him down right next to him, gives him all all the attention, obeying every instruction that the other elderly gentleman, which was Eliyahu Hanavi, gave him. When the party was over, the beggar came. This poor man came after this groom, and when he had him in a private corner, he says, "Listen, I'm a messenger from Kadosh Baruch Hu, from God, and I've come to take your soul." And the groom replied, he says, can you give me a year? I just got married. So he said, no, I can't give you a year. He says, what about a half a year? There's negotiating from the angel of death. And he says, no, I can't give you half a year. He says, the groom says, can you at least give me 7 days? Right? The Sheva Brachas, the 7 days that I'm staying with, can you at least give me that? And the angel of death says, I'm sorry, I can't even give you a single day. And the groom responded, he says, can I at least say goodbye to my wife? The angel of death said, because you acted so nicely to me, and so you gave me with so much kindness, I'll allow you to go and say goodbye to your wife. So he goes over to the bridal room, and he walks in, and he says, I've come to say goodbye. She's like, what are you talking about? He says, why are you saying goodbye? He says, the angel of death is outside. He's here to take my soul. He allowed me to say goodbye. And the wife is like, wait, he's right there? And he's like, yeah, he's taking my soul. I tried to negotiate, and nothing doing. And as any good Jewish woman would say, she's like, what? Let me talk to him. You stay here. I'm going to talk to him. And Kav, she goes out. He says, you're the angel of death? He says, yeah. He says, I'm here to take your husband's soul. He says, and then she goes and she says, doesn't it say in the Torah that when it says, Ki yachkach isha chadasha, when a person marries a new wife, he's not supposed to go to war for a year. He's supposed to stay with his wife for a year. Then he's supposed to stay home over the year. It says that you're supposed to stay with your wife, and we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu emes, v'tzarasai emes. God is of truth, and the Torah is of truth. Now, if you're going to take him, says that means that God, the Torah is not true. What are you going to take him? If he's not supposed to go to war, how are you going to go and take him away from me? And the wife responded and said, listen, if you listen to what I'm saying, good. If not, then I summon you, me and you, who are going up into the Din Torah to heaven. Let's go to the heavenly court to Din Torah. So the angel listened, and the angel responded. He says, because your husband has done kindness towards me, honored me, I will go grant your request, but I'm going to bring it up to to heaven and see what God says, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu says. He goes in for like a second. He comes back down, and he says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave your husband his life in the merit of the kindness that he gave towards this poor person. And they were all happy, b'simcha. They were all night they were celebrating. And this is a story that's written in the Medrash. By the way, if we just pause on the story, there was a cheat code in this story. The Eliyahu Hanavi came and said, by the way, someone's going to come. This is what you're supposed to do to pass to get to the next level. I gave them the cheat code. And it was still valued at so much. Imagine the power of what you're doing when you're not told to the cheat code. Meaning you're in a situation and you go and you respond, appropriately in this thing. But in any case, the Kav HaYashar goes on and it continues. And he says something very, very strict and very stern. Al kain tzarech ha'adam le'izahir. A person has to be very, very careful. He's warning. The Kav HaYashar is warning to never show a severe facial expression to a poor person when they're coming, when you're talking, to be sullen, to have this gloomy face towards the poor people. You have to be especially careful, says the Kav HaYashar, not to stare with anger, and especially those that partake in a suda of a mitzvah. Because shaming a poor person brings on great misfortune, says the Kav HaYashar. And in fact, the Rambam, in Hilchas Matanas Aniyim, says that if you could give a tremendous amount of money to a poor person, but if you give it in an unpleasant facial expression or unpleasant, countenance, this is something that will make you lose your merit. You should always give charity with a happy face, with a pleasant face. If a poor person asks for a donation, relax him, make him more, happier in his particular situation. And not only that, what you're supposed to do is that you have to be careful that you're not allowed to go and yell or raise your voice. And this is all the Rambam. The person is broken and crushed. It's a poor person. You're going to go and you're going to even bring them down into a lower place. You don't want to, it brings so much judgment. And this is what the Kav HaYashar is, explaining. And this is like the essence of really what I want to focus on. That a poor person goes through so much. You're going to go and someone goes and asks for money, and you're going to go and you're not going to, even just your facial expression of going and how you're going to interact with this poor person will will have a tremendous amount of effect of just your merit. If you're happy, you're gonna and you're pleasant, you're like calm, it will be like the level of reward is crazy. If you go and you give $1 million, but with like a tzibruch, like a broken face, angry and this and that, it's almost like you reduced your value of what you just gave from like 100% to like 1.5%. Like you're losing everything that you're gaining. And that's why something very interesting in Israel. I don't know that they do it over here. In Israel, it's like, you think about it. Nowadays, you're making a wedding, you're making a party. You don't really invite poor people. It doesn't work the way that in the olden days. The entire town, that was like, again, depending how far back you want to go, but let's say you want to call the Jewish ghetto, which will be like everybody lived in a very, very small, like everybody knew what everybody else was doing. Like it was a very small town. There was a few poor people. Knew that. Again, you're making a party, so you invite the whole town. You invite the poor people. Nowadays, what are you going to go? You're going to be like, oh yeah, you're my poor person. You're my plus poor person. For the wedding. It doesn't work that way. So there's a gemach in Israel that when someone makes a wedding, you're able to go and donate money to poor people that they on the day of the wedding they give it, and they have kind of like they're partaking in your in your simcha. But the point that I really want to focus on this chapter of the Kav HaYashar is your interaction, your facial expression, your emotion. Just like you have an effect on other people have an effect on you. But there's such a strong potential of either building or destroying just based on your facial expression, just based on your emotion. There was a story that is said over by Rabbi Chaim Zaid that he was once traveling with a group of people, and they were, I believe it was in Europe. They were going to do some sort of kiruv work. And they, he gets on the plane, and he's leaving from Israel into this other foreign country, and he gets the middle seat. So he sees that someone is in the aisle seat. This businessman, a bald guy, like sharply dressed, sitting on his computer, like very busy, working. And the rabbi walks in, obviously dressed looks like a rabbi. And he goes over very happy, good mood. And he goes with Rabbi, in Israel, if you want to say my brother, like, my bro, like my bro, it's achi. That's so he goes over to this businessman. He says, achi, he says, how are you? He says, do you mind if I go inside? And this businessman looks up from his computer, from his work, and he's very stern face, and he sighs. He gets up, closes the laptop, gets up, lets the rabbi walk in, and then he goes over to the rabbi, and he says, by the way, you could sit, I'll get up for you, no problem, but me and you, we're not brothers. We're not achim. We're not brothers. The rabbi says, oh, okay, fine, sorry, He sits over there, sitting on the flight, and all of a sudden, like during the flight, something happened that the rabbi's hat fell into this businessman's lap. And he says, oh, my brother, I'm so sorry. And the guy looked, back at him, and he says, I told you, we're not brothers. Keep your hat to yourself, like very, very aggressively. We're not brothers. I am me and you and me. We're no connection. Says, do me a favor. We are not brothers. Rabbi says, okay. And he sits silently for the rest of the flight. When they land, they're getting up to, get ready. The businessman is like, in a rush. He starts, rushing to go out. And the rabbi, looks at him and it says, listen, he says, you may not see me as your brother, but I see you as my brother, and I hope you have a great trip. Meaning he was just super positive to this very, very negative businessman. And the guy's like, he couldn't even respond. He was so busy, and he ran off the plane. The rabbi was collecting his belongings, and all of a sudden he sees that the briefcase that this businessman had, he left it under the seat. With all his rush, he forgot to take it. So the rabbi says, let me grab it. Let me see. Maybe I'll be able to return a lost item. And he takes the suitcase and he gets off the plane. He runs into the baggage claim, thinking maybe I'll be able to find him. He's looking around, can't find anybody here. And he starts looking, he starts finding. He runs out by where people are getting the cabs, can't find the guy. The guy disappeared. So he thinks, what am I going to do? He says, let me go to the information desk. Let me go to the airline. Maybe, I'll ask them for the passenger list, who's sitting right next to me, and then I'll, get his number somehow, either here or in Israel, and return the thing. And they return the suitcase. So he goes in and he goes into the information of the airline, the information desk over there, and he says, listen, I just came on this flight. Here's my ticket. I had someone that's sitting next to me. I wanted to get in touch with him. Can you do me a favor? Can you look up the roster and tell me the name? And the response of the person over there was like, I'm sorry, that is confidential. We can't just share with you our passengers' information. He says, no, you don't understand. I need to get sitting next to me. I really need to get. He's trying to convince him. The bottom line is, she would not give him. She now give him the name. So he's thinking, he's like, what he's going to do now? People are boarding. He has to run to his hotel. He says, I'll take the suitcase. He says, I'll take it with me. I'll go into the hotel room. Once I get over there, I'll open it up. I'm sure he has some sort of information over there, and I'll call up and we'll meet up over there. He goes, collects all his luggage, runs out, grabs a cab. They go to their hotel. They settle in. As they, after they settle into the hotel room, he goes into the suitcase and he tries to open it, and he realizes it's locked. And he says, "Oh no, this is what am I going to do?" He says, "He can't unlock it." He says, "Should I bring it back? Lost and found." He'll think about it, afterwards, and he puts it down. They go about their, business. There's a few days that go by, and one day there were a group of rabbis that were doing kiruv in this foreign country, and they're sitting in the hotel room and they're eating their meal. There was a large group, so they took a small conference room. There was an Israeli businessman that was walking by, and he sees this whole group of rabbis, and they're eating, food. So he goes over to them. He says, "Listen," he says, we're on business over here, and there's no kosher food. Do you mind if we'll pay for it? Of course. This is me and my partner. He says, "Do you mind if we go and we join you?" And he was speaking to this rabbi. He says, "No." And this rabbi is calling everybody my brother this trip. He says, "Achi, my brother, of course. No, you come. Don't worry about it." He says, "You come, you enjoy. It's on the house." And this businessman says, "Do you mind? I have a partner. He's right outside. Can he join also?" He says, "Bring whoever you need. Come, we'll join. We'll eat all together." And so this person comes out and goes out and brings back his partner. Who is the partner? None other than the businessman that was sitting next to him on the plane. And the rabbi looks at him, the businessman looks at him, and they're staring at each other for like 20 seconds. And all of a sudden, the rabbi, a big smile on his face. He says, "Achi, my brother!" He says, "Why don't you come and join us?" And the guy is like, he's starving, he wanted to eat some kosher, whatever it is, he says, "Okay, fine." He goes in, And he starts, the businessman starts apologizing. He says, listen, I didn't mean to, the conversation that we had, now he's getting free food, he's like talking a little bit differently. And all of a sudden the rabbi looks like his eyes will get widened, and he says, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but hold that thought. And he runs into his room. It was so busy, he completely forgot he has the guy's suitcase. He runs into his room, takes the briefcase, he runs back down, he goes over to this businessman, and he shows them, says, this is yours, my brother, no? And the guy, this Israeli, secular businessman, looks at him. His mouth just drops open, his eyes widen, and he's like, you have no idea what you just saved from. He says, we're on a business trip. He says, everything, all my context, everything is in this. He says, I lost it. I was doing everything by memory. It was going to be a waste of a trip. And he's like, almost like tearing up. He says, I don't know how to thank you. And, after a few minutes, when he finally composes himself, and he says, if this is what it means to be religious, then yeah, I'm your brother and you're my brother. And they talk a little bit. The next morning, they also happened to be staying in that hotel that night. The next morning, they had a minyan that they were praying downstairs. And who walks into to the place to pray is none other than the secular businessman, and he puts on tefillin. And this only happens in Israel, where you have a kiruv rabbi looks at a secular person and who has never put on tefillin. He says, "What are you doing here? What's going on?" He says, And the secular businessman says, you should know. He says, this is the first time in my life that I'm putting on tefillin. He says, by my bar mitzvah, I didn't have one, and I never put on tefillin. This is the first time in my life, and I'm doing it because of you. And not only that, he says, when I get home, I want to get tefillin. I want to be religious just like you. If this is how you care for other people, I want to be like that. And the rabbi continues his story. He says, when they got back to Israel, they kept in contact. He bought this businessman, he bought him a pair of tefillin, and this businessman ended up becoming religious. Look at the difference in how you can affect and change a person just by your interaction. It all started by two people sitting on a plane. One person was aggressive, angry, depressed, in a broken mood. The other person was light and happy. Now, that first interaction, when the rabbi was like, "Oh, my brother, what's going on? How are you?" And the guy was like, "Oh, I'm not your brother." It could have been shut down right then and there. But the rabbi didn't start. He continued with his positivity. He's continued with the smile. He continued with the joy and happiness. And in turn, that affected to have a change, not in a day of this person, the entire life of this person and the family of this person. Speaking to someone nicely can have such an effect. Smiling to someone, having a positive, just body language has a tremendous effect of it. I want to finish off with one final story, and that is there was in Frankfurt a little bit over 220 years ago. There was a young boy by the name of Amshel. Amshel, he lost his father when he was 14. And he had nothing, he wasn't able to sit and learn so much. He wasn't able to do what he was, what his entire family was doing. So the rabbi of the community, Rabbi Zevi Horowitz, he went and he said, listen, this rabbi was a tzaddik of a man. He would always go and help orphans, and he would help poor people, and anybody, like people came to his doorstep for help, for blessings, for everything. He was a righteous man. And it was getting a little bit hectic, and he needed a helper. He needed a shamash, a helper. And he looked at this 14-year-old boy, just lost his parents. Says, maybe you want to come, maybe you want to help me. And he says, yeah. He says, I'm not able to really, I can utilize the help, even though it doesn't pay much. He says, but I could definitely utilize and help the rabbi. So he went and he started helping the rabbi, running over here, doing little errands here and there, but he was always in the house. He knew where everything was. And this particular rabbi had a fund that he kept. He had a bunch of gold coins in his desk that he specifically collected and saved for orphans and widows. And nobody knew about it. Not his family. The only person that knew about it was this Amshel. Was his helper. as this Amshel grew up, and as he became of age to get married, he found a girl. And they got married, and they moved to the town of where the girl was, and the father-in-law went and opened them up a small store. A few months go by, and it's Erev Pesach, and this Rabbi Horowitz was cleaning up his desk, and he opens up the drawer of where he keeps all the money, which is the secret drawer where he keeps all his money for the orphans and the widows, and he sees that it's empty. And he starts saying, he says, wait a minute, what happened? He says, the only person in the world that knows that this money is this Amshel, is the guy that just got married a few months ago. And he's like, but this guy, he says, he would never steal. He's thinking back before his head, he would never steal from me. I can't imagine, after all, no, this is it. And the rabbi started answering. He says, it must be that this boy, he probably needed money to start up. So he borrowed, air quotes, borrowed this money, and he was going to go and he was going to, pay back, eventually. But the rabbi was still very bothered, so he went and he traveled to the nearby town to visit his old shamash, his old assistant, to see what's going on. And he walks, into this, to the house of this of his former assistant, and he says, and he didn't even accuse him. He says, I know that you obviously took the money. There was no one else. The money was gone over here, and he says, I know you probably meant to borrow it, and you probably meant to pay me back, but this is orphan money, and this is money for widows, and you have to return it. And this Amshel, this young, recently married man is listening. He didn't say a word. He didn't defend himself. He didn't say, object. He didn't say anything. And all of a sudden, tears swell up in his eyes, and he nods, and he says, he tells the rabbi, wait here for a second. He runs into his store. He opens up the cash register, takes everything out, and he goes and it pulls together whatever money that he had saved up, and he said, This is the money that I have. Unfortunately, it's only half, but don't worry about it. I'm good for it. I'm going to be sending you money as soon as it comes in. I'm going to send until I pay back fully. And the rabbi says he was very happy, he's paying back, he's got the money. He says, no, not a problem, I understand. He said, he sees this, it's a good guy, yeah, maybe he made a mistake, maybe he took money that didn't belong to him, but you know what, he stepped up to it, and he's giving back, everything is good. So he travels back home, and his assistant really did every few weeks, more money came until he paid back fully. A few months go by, and the rabbi it's late at night. The rabbi is busy learning, very much delved into learning. His mind is completely there. And all of a sudden, there's a knock on the door. And he doesn't hear. There's a loud knocking continues. And he gets up, and he goes, opens the door, and he sees the chief of the police is standing right at his door. He's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? It's the middle of the night. Is everything okay? What's going on? And he says, yeah, everything's okay. There's nothing wrong. But, he starts questioning the rabbi. He says, did someone steal something from you in the past, few months? And the rabbi said, what do you mean? Yeah, but they pay back. Don't worry about it. I got it covered. And the chief of police says, do me a favor, come down to the station. The rabbi didn't have a choice. He goes down to the station. And the rabbi explained, yeah, don't worry about it. Something happened, but we took care of it. The guy's paying back. We don't want to, file any charges against this person. And as the rabbi is explaining it, the chief of police opens up his drawer, takes out a pouch that is the exact pouch that the rabbi kept in his hidden drawer. And he says, is this yours? And the rabbi looks at it, and he's like, how do you have that? And the chief of police, calls in. He says he calls in this woman, and he says, do you recognize this woman? And the rabbi's looking, and he's like, I don't think so. I don't know. And the chief of police says, listen, you're probably a rabbi, you're probably folk, you don't really, see them on. She used to clean your house. And he's like, oh yeah, she used to clean. She used to be the maid. And the chief of police says, we got a full confession out of her. And this, says the chief of police, is what happened. So she was cleaning her house a few months ago, and this is what she said. She found a pouch of money. She took the money, And she showed it to her husband, who happened to be a drunkard, and she said, look how much money, 500 gold coins, okay, we can live. I don't have to work anymore. So she quit your job, but they were trying to be smart. They were like, oh, we're not going to spend it because people are going to start asking questions. So they went and they buried this pouch of money in their backyard. But her husband was a drunkard, and he would go in, to the local inn and go to the bar and start ordering drinks, and he would pay with these silver coins. And the innkeeper says, "Where do you get it from?" And the guy says, "Oh, don't worry about it. I found it." And one found that, and something, triggered the innkeeper, and he called the police and said, "Something's off over here." And we investigated, and we got a full confession from her and from her husband. This is your money. Here you go, and they return it to him. And the rabbi thinks about it. He says, "I don't understand." He says, "The other guy, how did this?" And he goes right away. He doesn't waste any time. The next morning, he goes right away to his assistant. And he says, I got the money. He says, "If you didn't steal it, why didn't you tell me?" He says, "Why didn't you say something?" And the assistant says, he says, "Rabbi, I saw how it affected you. I saw, if I would have said I didn't steal it, you wouldn't have taken my money, and you wouldn't have, and I know poor orphans, widows, they needed the money." He says, "You would have had to go to somebody else." He says, "You know what? You already thought that I did it." He says, "All right, you did it. Let me go and let me sponsor this." And he says, "I didn't want to say anything, and this is why I kept it to you." The rabbi took the bag of money. He says, "You paid," because he paid him back. He goes over to his assistant and says, "This is yours." And he says, "I'm going to give you a blessing. I'm going to give you a blessing. I want you to go to Frankfurt, and you're there. You're going to go into business. You're going to be very, very, successful." And this is what happened. He went to Frankfurt. He started opening up. He became a successful merchant. Then he went into the money changer business, and the rest is history. This person's last name was Rothschild. This is how the Rothschild made their first, the first money. His son, Mayor Angel Rothschild, was the one who really blew it up. But look at how much one small scenario changed decades of a family lineage and changed the entire aspect of what this families became the supporters of the Jewish people. They helped the Jewish people. They became, forget about the billionaires. They were extremely, extremely, extremely wealthy, and that all stemmed from the interaction that he had with his rabbi. This is how careful we have to be, and it's so easy. Someone accuses you. Your first thing you want to do is fight back. Stop for a second. I mean, obviously, it's easier said than done. I mean, this is really the lesson of the day. Your emotions affect other people. Other people's emotions affect you. But when you get into a test, when you get into a scenario, stop for a second. You don't know the power. You don't know the Kav HaYashar. The guy was at his wedding, and a poor person came. The last thing that you're thinking about is that poor person. But no, that's the time when you go and you stop and you think and you do what's right. He created the greatest merit that he ever had in his life. Saved his life. In those moments when we feel like we're busy, or moments that we feel it's hectic, the moments that we feel we have the right to fight back, the moments that we feel that we have the right to defend ourselves, those are the moments of growth. Those are the moments that we have the ability to go and say, "Wait a minute, here we have an opportunity over here." Someone goes and starts yelling at you. Stop for a second. If you're able to stop and be able to be like, just like, "Oh, okay, fine," respond positively. You have no idea the effect and the power of just a positive response that you would have. And this is such an important lesson that we could really take home. It's so practical. If you would just take away this aspect, it's all about those little micro moments. Just like it's in the relationship, so too in day to day. You're in a bad mood, you had a tough day, and your kids are coming, your wife is coming, your parents are coming, your friends are coming. Whatever the scenario is, take a deep breath and respond positively. Respond, and you don't know the merits, you don't know the reward that you can come and get. We'll end off with a Kapitel Tehillim for Klal Yisrael, and then we will open up to any questions if we, I think we have maybe one question. As usual, we'll say Kapitel Kuf Lamed. Shir Malais Mima'amakim Karasicha Adonai Adonai Shema bekoili tiena aznecha kashuv v'isa kol tachanunai im avay nestishmar ya Adonai mi yamoid ki im chas licha leman tivarei ki vi si Adonai kif sa nafshi v'litvarei chalti nafshi la Adonai mishamim la baiker shomim la baiker yachel Yisrael la Adonai ki ma Adonai chesed v'arabei moifedus v'hu yifteres Yisrael mikol avanesav achinu kol beis Yisrael anesunim batzaro v'ashivya ha'im dem bein bayam u'bein bayabasha ha'makim yirachim aliyim ויציע מצרה לרווחה מאפלה לערה ומשיבה לגאולה השתה בעגלה בזמן קריב ונאמר אמן. Okay, we only had one question that came in. What is the best advice we should do since the election to keep us safe? Should we move to Israel? That's an excellent question. First of all, if someone has the ability to move to Israel and they're able to do it, again, there's a lot of criteria, but if you're able to do it, of course you should. But really, the most important thing that you have to realize is with this, with this election, wherever you are, is we have to do it hishtadlus. Our effort is that we have to go and we have to vote. After that, we have to have emunah. We have to have faith that whatever God, decides, that's what's going to be. The bitachon that comes after that is that no matter what happens, we have bitachon that this is for the best. Now, I could go and tell you how, if you look in history, Donald Trump was president in 2016, and then he lost in 2020 to Joe Biden, which you think it would be the worst thing, but because of that, because Joe Biden was there, he won in the 2024, which ended up looking like it's positive. You could go back and forth on how you see it. The bottom line is that we have to have emunah and bitachon in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we did what we need to do, and the rest is up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yes, Diana, you have a question?
Yes, thank you very much for your show. I just want to let you know that I've been trying to learn from you. I got your WhatsApp group, but because of Rabbi Mizrahi's shared your link. So.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that. Oh wow.
Yeah, long ago. But yeah. Thank you. I just wanted to ask you something. It's kind of personal. Sorry for the question. I apologize in advance.
No problem.
Have you ever been in that situation, like in the other side of the question, like you were the person that had this kind of upsetting feeling, very upsetting feeling for other people, right? That you can manage yourself. I mean, we are all human beings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I can ask you this question because, so have you ever been like in the other side of the question where you are the one that is upset? And how have you been feeling? I mean, how you felt in that point, and how you find how you were able to find the way out, like. What was the assistance that you were given, that you were expecting, that actually helped you? If you can repeat.
Yes, excellent question. So I'm just going to repeat the question. So the question is, have I ever been in that scenario where I was, like let's say someone, yelled at me or whatever it was. It was a very emotional scenario. How did I respond to that? And you're right, we're all human, and I'm sure more times that I have succeeded, I've failed in that scenario. But I do remember and it's funny that you mentioned this, because I was once in I did have this scenario that just came into mind where I was interacting with someone who was very upset with me, and sometimes it's my fault, and I get okay, fine. And this one, I don't remember the scenario, but I remember oh, this guy must be having a bad day. That was my thought process. And I'll tell you what, and I responded positively. And all I did was he's like, I can't believe you did that. And I'm like, I know, I can't believe I did that as well. Terrible, I'm sorry. And I just apologized. And he was it was a non-Jewish interaction, and he was just ready for a fight. He kept on coming in strong, and I was like, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. I don't remember the scenario. The truth is, but I remember the interaction, and like after 2 times, the guy was like, oh, he couldn't, and just walked off. And I was like, oh wow, like this guy wanted a fight and he didn't fight. And now this happened to be one. I'm sure there was 10 other scenarios where someone did something to me and I was, oh yeah, well, blah blah. You know, like unfortunately, my mouth is pretty big. You know, so like I'm not always quiet, but like I try to be. And here's I think the breaker point. Like it's all about just like that conscious thought process that if the guy responded. And you're thinking, be like, okay, wait a minute, like put the defense down. It's not about him. It's not about the situation. Like the guy, whatever. If you are able to just like think about it, you're able to respond positively. The problem is we don't think. We respond immediately with our emotions. And once we respond immediately with our emotions, then, you know, we're all, you know, doomed to failure automatically. And I think this is the key point. The key point is to be able to like, think about it. Think before you respond. And it's so hard. It's not easy. It's so hard. But I think that is that is the key. We had here another question. How do we, and this looks like the last question, and Shira has an answer over here. How do we protect ourselves from taking negative energy or moods, especially when we work in healthcare and see so many patients every single day? Okay, that's an excellent question, and that's a question on a whole different level, because it's not only like a mood. You're seeing sick people that are, you know, like it's also, it affects them, you know, emotionally. I believe the answer is on the same plane that we just spoke about, and that is, if you're cognitively thinking, if your brain is realizing, okay, they're going through a difficult time, and they're like, don't take that home, don't take that internally. And I'll tell you, like, you know, from a rabbi perspective, people only speak about people when people call me. It's I shouldn't say only. It's 95% about problems. It's never someone's like, oh, I just want to say my day is great. Everything is working amazing. My business is great. My marriage is great. My children are great. Everything is great. I just wanted to say that, and thank you so much and goodbye. You know, like, I don't get that. It's usually like, this is broken. This is failing. This is the issue. It's usually the issues that, you know, that come into it. And years ago, when I first, you know, was involved in the public world, let's call it, I was like, every scenario, I was like, oh wow, it really took it in, and I had to like kind of separate it or compartmentalize like these, you know, things. And I think that's really what we need to do. Like, people have a negative, you know, like, we have the ability to take so many things out of every scenario in your life is a learning experience, and you could take it positively, you could take it negatively. You kind of make your growth. The God throws through to you obstacles. Now you make those growth. You could take those obstacles and help them bring you down, or you could take those obstacles and help you, you know, go up. So in your example, let's say healthcare. So you're sitting over there, people are sick. You're seeing people that are not healthy and they're broken, and you have the ability to go and be like, oh, this world, so much suffering, so you could bring down. Or you could look at it the other way and be like, oh, thank God I'm healthy. Thank God my family's healthy. Thank God. And you look at it from it's all about the viewpoint and perspective that you're able to go and you're able to look at. But also don't forget that when you are going and you are in the healthcare field, your emotions is going to also affect other people. Now again, someone's sick in a hospital with broken bones and things like that, you're going to go in, you're going to be like, hey, what's going on? You know, all happy. They're not going to be like, oh yeah, like everything's great. But subconsciously, it's going to affect them. It's going to change them. It's going to have some sort of effect on them. And the more that you do it, the more that it's going to go and have more an effect on it. Okay, looks like that is all the questions that we had. Thank you all for joining. Until next time, may you all have an amazing, successful, blessed week.